We're gonna don't worry about it. We're gonna reconvene. We got lots coming up next week. Actually, this week and next week. But this week is the week. So excited for the presentation coming up. Enjoy the nice hold. Can you hear it? Y'all just let me know, or give me a little thumbs up, or in the chat, let me know that you can hear hip hop sounds. My voice. Good technology wise.
I see your screen and I hear music.
All right, now that's exactly what I needed to know. We're gonna get started in a couple of minutes. I'm so excited, though. I'm very excited.
Dior, can we also speak after the meeting?
Absolutely.
Please, thank you.
Absolutely. We'll let folks hop off, and then we'll talk. We did get your email, so thank you so much for sending. And yes, that's what I was mentioning. We have a couple of things coming up this week that'll help to really charge the legislative committee.
Thank you.
You might want to step in the place in the Bronx SWAB where we talk about waste. You maybe can't see my face, but it's all good because you know I take up space. Hey, Lilibeth in the chat, if we talk to you, you can chat back. It's okay, that's how we do it here. It's the Bronx, this is sustainability. Sustainability, I was like back and forth between sustainability and recycling. My brain went with sustainability, but it should have been recycling. Less syllables. Recycling. Way less simple. Syllables. Oh, I love it. These are the principles of environmental justice. If you are not familiar with them, which I'm sure you all probably are, if not, please read through it, familiarize yourself with it. We start all of our environmental justice committee meetings with one of the principles so that we can really discuss it and see what matters and what resonates to us. So as you read through it, figure out the principles that feel really solid to you. There's one in particular that I'm going to start with when we kick off this meeting in a few minutes. But yeah, just read through it. It's important that we ground ourselves in this, especially in the Bronx, with us having an environmental justice community in the South Bronx. It's crucial. That's why we do this work. That's why we're coming together to advocate for, better living conditions, cleaner environment, more beautiful environment for our children, for ourselves. Our health is important. We are not less valuable just because we're in a high socioeconomic status. Also very deliberate and intentional. So yeah, we come here together in this stage to put our energy in the direction of healing for our planet and ourselves. Just waiting for John to hop on the line. Hello, Nathan. Hello. Once John is here, we can get going. I'm going to just highlight down here at the bottom, as I asked you all to read through the principles. The one that I really wanted to put emphasis on today is principle number 12, which affirms the need for urban and rural ecological policies, right? We're talking about policy, y'all, to clean up and rebuild our cities and rural areas in balance with nature, honoring the cultural integrity of all of our communities, and provided fair access for all to the full range of resources. So when we talk about that full range of resources, we're talking about the institutions, the actual infrastructure, the finances that are going to really support us and help us transition ourselves back to a symbiotic and more holistic relationship with this planet. So yeah, I really just want to say, I hope for number 12, tell me in the chat what this means for you. What does this look like to you? To me, it looks like getting this policy, right? Showing up for the policy sort of rallies, giving testimony when there are these hearings, calling your representatives, be it state, local, federal, and letting them know that the work that we're doing, and you lending your individual voice as a resident. These are some of the ways that policy can support that, and the CCIA is one that we really have been getting behind as a SWAB and talking a lot about, as well as EPR, universal organics. That bill is going to be presented this Wednesday, this Thursday actually, at the Zero Waste rally. So I'll be posting that information in the chat so that everybody can have that. But yeah, let me know in the chat for environmental justice principle number 12. I'm going to copy it and paste it and put it in the chat. What does this look like for you in real time? What does it look like for you in real time? How are we activating that in a way that is action oriented? So welcome, y'all. Thank you so much, Claire, for being here. We're going to kick off and get started. As I mentioned, let me know. It's important that we all connect and tap into and really, for us to really, there goes John. Is it gonna let me see. It's gonna let me copy and paste. Is it gonna let me copy and paste this principle so that I can hear your thoughts and see your thoughts? Here we go. All right, excellent. So we're gonna get started. Now here at the Bronx SWAB, you all know, Alyssa, everybody knows, Nathan's here. Welcome, Leah. Leah, we did our master composter course together, so it's nice to see you pop in. So as I asked and mentioned, let us know how environmental justice principle number 12 resonates for you in an action-oriented way. Right now, Claire is going to give us a presentation, and Claire, please do introduce yourself. She's from the Center for Zero Waste Design. And really, it is so great, because when we have these conversations on the back end, when we put the responsibility on the consumer, we completely neglect the inefficiencies within the system in the design principles that got us here in the first place. So Claire is going to let us know a little bit more about the Put Waste to Work campaign. And yeah, we're really trying to push to see if we can pilot an area where we might be able to do some containerization out here in the Bronx and do some cleanup and get out there and really talk to folks and see what their concerns are locally, so that by putting our bodies on the ground, we are better able to interact with folks. It was great to be able to provide content and knowledge throughout all of these months, as we kind of just gathered interest and got people together to kind of come back to this space and figure out how we could re-envision it. And so now at this point, I think that we've done enough of that. It's time to get action oriented, right? We got to move and do some physical things out in the community to move it forward. So Claire, please do introduce yourself, and feel free to give us what it is that you got. Give us what you got for a pork chop, unless that's not what you're trying to give up.
Thanks, Theo. It's great to be here. So yeah, I'm an architect by background, and then I realized that the building I had just designed was really bad in terms of how it collected waste, and it wouldn't be easy to collect organic waste from it. And it kind of led me to the development of the zero waste design guidelines in the city, where city agencies, building managers, the Department of Sanitation and designers and architects got together and thought, how could we design stuff so the system was better? And that was a few years ago in 2017. And then things haven't changed that fast in the city. Like, we put out a lot of ideas, like let's get rid of setting our waste out in bags, then we might have a bit less litter and rats, but nothing really happened. So apart from the small clean curbs, maybe. So we've been pushing with this advocacy campaign, which I'd like to share with you now. I can share my screen for it. And really it's a whole host of ideas that we think would improve the waste system in the city. And I have shown it to the other SWABs, and Brooklyn SWAB has signed on to endorse it. Manhattan and Queens say they will, but they're taking their time. And there is a website, putwastetowork.org, where you can see everybody who's endorsed it, and you can find out more about it. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview. It's really about making streetscapes better, providing green jobs, and making neighborhoods healthier. So it's in 3 sections. The first one, circulate. All the things we can do to kind of promote reuse, salvage, and create less waste to start with. And one of the policy changes we really think is important is save as you throw. But some of the things are, you know, having spaces for reuse and repair, and reducing litter can happen if you have, say, a network of reusable containers for food takeout. Save as you throw is a really important one, we think, where people in low density neighborhoods would just use your regular containers, and you pay more if you have a bigger bin. For big buildings, you have to charge per bag, or we want to push to containerization for everything. So you could charge by container size, but we think it needs to be done at a building scale, not individuals buying separate bags. Because then if a building could save money on, if they reduce their trash, they could, for example, hire a micro hauler to pick up their organic waste, because there'd be money that they'd be saving to do whatever they thought would help. So it would incentivize the building. But the next section is all about how you could put waste in containers to reduce the impact on sidewalks and make it easier to do it with less staff in buildings. Because currently, I'm sorry, these are all Brooklyn pictures because this was from the Brooklyn SWAB, but just the fact that we use bags creates trash. People see a pile of bags and they're like, oh, let me put my Dunkin' Donuts thing on top. That's obviously a pile of trash. But then when the bags are taken, the stuff is left on the street. And we see that everywhere in these neighborhoods where there's not building staff to clean up. This is directly after trash pickup. There's so much litter in the streets. And some neighborhoods have a lot of bid cleaning crews. They have building staff that come out immediately afterwards and clean up all that mess. But if your neighborhood doesn't have that level of resources, you're going to have a dirty street, especially in a city like New York that doesn't have municipal sidewalk cleaning. They only clean, street sweepers only do the street. And then rats are hugely on the increase because of the bags. And it's not good for labor either. DSNY, these guys are picking up like 5 tons or so each a shift, and back injuries are really bad. And it would be so much better if, like most other cities in any other country in the world, apart from the US, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, in Europe, they all use these wheelie bins, and they can use these slightly larger bins. And you still need the same amount of people to bring them to the truck, and they just tip it up into the truck. I've actually been doing a bit of research, and DSNY could just put this mechanism on the back of their existing trucks for, it just costs $10,000 a truck. And there are some cities around in Delaware and little small places that have done that. And The other thing, this is what DSNY have done, is this pilot program for clean curbs. But the problem is it's really small. The bid has to pay for it. If it's kind of community waste, they'll still only pick up small little containers. So we think they should do something more like they did in Paris, where they piloted enclosure citywide in like 40 locations across the city. And then when they found out the kinks of it, they designed a standard enclosure that can be used all around the city. And these are really good for kind of medium to low density, where you may have stores on the ground floor and a few walk-ups above, where every resident can bring their waste down to these shared containers in the street. They're not very good for high density where you have building staff, but for low density, and I can think of many areas in the Bronx that have that kind of main street with some retail and just a few 3 or 4 stories of walk-ups above, where these would make a lot of sense. But we think there should be a city standard design. Not every neighborhood have to design and make up and maintain their own. And then we think there can be options for organics as part of these enclosures, because organic waste is quite a lot to manage in some buildings that don't have a lot of space. So using space in the street makes sense. We have one option where we actually thought of people like Dior that pick up containers of waste, and you could have an enclosure that you drop off your full containers and pick up a clean one later. And it's actually much more space efficient on the curb than any of the other containers. You could, because you could roll them in there and empty them the other side, you could have a lot of space. So we kind of think that there needs to be a lot of options to allow for pickup in the street when it makes sense. But large buildings, like say big buildings on Grand Concourse or whatever, you'd find that often there are people bringing the waste from bins on every story, they're bringing it down, and they may be bringing it out and then making a pile outside. What would make much more sense than them having to take all that time to make a pile outside is if those could be picked up directly by the truck. Like pulled straight to the truck and picked up. And in new buildings, we also think code should be changed so you don't have to have a waste room on every story, but you can just have a central one. So you don't have to have such a high level of staff to come to a room on every story of every building. And that has to be a building code change. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas in here. The other thing is that these bins are so small because they have to be emptied by hand. So a big building, if they really separated all their food scraps, may have 20 of them 3 times a week. That doesn't really make sense. It would make sense if they had the automatic lifters for larger bins. This is a project in the Bronx that Dior knows about, that is a food incubator building where they've actually put in this biodigester. It's kind of like a dehydrator with microbes, and you put in food waste and it brings it down to like 10 to 15% of the volume, and it creates a fertilizer. It's not a proper compost because they don't put in browns, but they've done that because they qualified for mandatory organic separation. So it actually pays back over time. And then the management company want to try using it for the first residential building. So residents will be given caddies for food waste and bring them to the building with the biodigester. We were also looking about doing composting and site for the rest of the landscaping, but it's a phased project, so that would happen later. And then lastly, the Put Waste to Work kind of advocates for composting to belong in parks across the city and green spaces to help regenerate soils. So currently, DSNY helps fund the compost project where you can drop off at, farmers markets or drop-off sites. They're combined with leaves. They're composted in only 5 sites, 3 of them on Parks Department land, and then the compost is taken to lots of different street trees, give away to community groups. But the problem is parks were not renewing the leases for these community composters, so need to realize that composting should belong in all green spaces. And there are some examples of that in the city, like Battery Park City. They collect food scraps and horticultural waste, they compost it and use it in their parks. the East River Resilience Park was where the Lower East Side Ecology Center, they didn't want it in their new park. I'm hoping they're going to design it in now. But I think it should really just be composting the waste from the close by neighborhood and the park, and then creating enough soil for the park. And then it does belong in a park. It's not waste treatment for elsewhere. It's regenerating the soils of the park. Domino Park in Brooklyn have done the same thing. Because I think if compost is thought of as recreation, education, it supports urban agriculture, we could argue to Parks Department, it does belong in parks, and not just parks, all green spaces like nature housing, school yards, because anywhere we have lawns and soils that are getting compacted, if you can add compost, you can store so much more stormwater, and that helps in flooding, and it also helps just trees and grass to be healthier. Because this is actually a block away from where I live, and I look at it and I'm like, what useless buildings full of useless things that nobody's using, mini storage, trash full of on streets, trash from all the single-use disposables everywhere. That's what our city looks like if we don't deal with trash. But if we do, it can be something much greener, much more circular, with low impact transport, greener streets that don't have to always have cars and trucks. So that's my last slide, and it really just shows that it would help the city with so many of its goals, much more than zero waste, but air quality, healthy neighborhoods, vision zero for fewer trucks, workforce development, there are many more jobs in repair and composting than there are in dealing with trash. So yeah, that's a quick overview. But if anybody would want to see the website, I think I could just quickly pull it up. And I'm happy to take questions too, but yeah, if you go to putwastetowork.org, the website's here, and we have a list of everybody. If you want to sign up for more information, you can sign up there, and we have a list of everybody who's supported it to date, including some former commissioners. So we're really pushing now the city to think about some of these things. And this section here is a lot about some of the pilots, and we're kind of filling this with more ideas we have about what should be done. Hope there wasn't too much too fast, but just a quick overview.
Thank you, Claire. I have a question with the zero waste rally coming up on Thursday, and I know that they're going to be introducing some legislation around bringing the CORE Act back. Can you speak a little bit to what aspect of all of these different ideas around the different design thinking within the waste handling? What, if you could just speak to the CORE Act specifically in universal organics, and how one of these ideas we could connect them?
I mean, I think universal organics, meaning that you're picking up from everybody, has to happen. That I agree. I think all soils should be regenerated with compost, but we're not going to be able to use all the food waste in the city. There'll be more food waste. So we do need it to be convenient and picked up curbside as well. So I think that relates there. The CORE Act is the drop-off places, right, for the other waste streams. Mm-hmm. And that is another thing that we mentioned, that it should be easy. At the moment, it's not very easy to drop off your hazardous waste, your e-waste, or many of those streams. And yes, it should be easy to drop them off in different neighborhoods. I guess we've got a little bit more of a different focus rather than focusing on immediate legislation. We're trying to put the focus on the solid waste management plan coming up in a few years' time and suggesting that the city do a lot of pilots now, like of those wheelie bins, and pilots of biodigester equipment, pilots of different ways of picking up food waste, pilots of more composting in the city. So then they have a lot of data they can use, pilots of clean curb type enclosures in the parking lane. And then they work that into the plan for the new solid waste management plan, and that they have a technical advisory committee, and it's a transparent process this time that the SWABs should be involved in too, we believe. And I think last time it wasn't a very transparent process, and it was only really about equity of transfer station, which, while important, isn't the whole picture. We need the solid waste management plan to focus on everything from how you pick up on the street to the processing. And I hope it will focus on everything this time. So that's kind of more where our focus is on, a bit more long-term than the immediate policies.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I did, I'm gonna ask Lilibeth's question, and I think I can answer it for you, Lilibeth. But one of the things that I really wanna draw attention to is specifically the CCIA, right? Because you have to think about how we're going to fund a lot of these pilots, a lot of these transitions, and what it can look like long term. So part of it is, how do we handle, and I know, specifically speaking to organic waste, but there are multiple streams of waste. So when we come here in the space for these general SWAB meetings, we want to give you the information from different perspectives, right? Of people who can inform you of the different streams and what's happening. But what's coming up this week, and I'll put it in the chat, there's a couple of different actions that are going to be happening. And then I'll answer your question, Lilibeth. But there's a couple of different actions that are happening that if we can see who from the SWAB can actually show up. Because if we can go there and represent and come out, these are the times, right? To give the testimony, to show up to the rallies, to be able to have your bodies there, like let the legislative part of everything, that's what it looks like, right? And that aspect of things. And then we can go to the borough president, right? Like we have a direct line with the borough president as a SWAB, and then to say, hey, this is what we want to pilot in this area. So this is how we begin to move it forward. So one of the things I had mentioned before was actually going out, having a day where we do a cleanup in a particular neighborhood that we want to pilot, right? That we want to pilot this sort of new way of thinking about handling the waste. And we can be intentional about and strategic about how we choose that neighborhood. So take a look at the stuff in the chat, and please do let me know if you can come out either Thursday or Friday. That would be great. Again, so I think that would really help to stimulate the work that we want to see happen within the legislative committee at the Bronx SWAB. So the question that Lilibeth asked me about was the Bronx SWAB signing on to this. So that will go out as a simple vote, right? We have to just, people who are consistently coming, who have fulfilled the requirements, filled out the application, showed up to at least 3 meetings, like we will just vote, right? And ask if you want to support this based on the presentation that's been given. And Claire, how would we let you know? Is this something we fill out, or just shoot you an email?
Let me know what, sorry?
Around supporting it. So you showed us a list.
Oh yeah, you just do it. You can just fill in your name on that that form right on the website. Cool.
So
and you can do it as an individual, which just signs you up to the email list, or you can say I'm an organization. Should Bronx SWAB want to support, they could support as an organization.
Great. And so Leah in the chat says they have the pay-as-you-throw system. Residential garbage costs are costly, and it really forced a major change. For example, customers unpack packaging and leave it at the store instead of putting it in their costly garbage bag, which forces manufacturers to use like packaging. This is why Aldi in Germany has a counter for customers to use after they have paid for their groceries to leave unneeded packaging at the store. You can see this counter in your store. So yeah, I think, thank you for pointing that out. If you can speak to the pay-as-you-throw, Claire, I think that would be great, because that is something that comes up in these conversations a lot, and is always shot down in this city. Like it is significant.
Yeah, what I heard was it was going to be studied. They had the money to study. And then Corey Johnson was asked, are you going to make people pay for garbage? And he wasn't briefed. So he said, no. And then Catherine Garcia thought it was not there wasn't the political will to do it. But I think what needs to be understood is that it should save money for most people if you, it'll save money if you create less trash than normal. So it should be, I mean, the easiest way to do it in New York City, because we don't pay for trash and it's in taxes, is to have some kind of tax rebate for buildings and then have buildings pay for the amount of trash. To do it for individuals is a bit more tricky to figure out in New York City, but they should study it. And I think the city council and Sandy Nurse have asked for money to study it, because that's what the study is meant to look at. What's the best way to implement it in New York City? But nationwide, they found when cities have implemented it, the amount of trash goes down 17% immediately. And it works really well with containers, because in many cities, you just buy a bigger garbage can if you want to, and then you pay more for your monthly garbage bin. If you think of like 2 or 3 family residences in lower density neighborhoods, they just buy different size bins and pay a different rate. And that's what happens in many cities. So that's very simple, because the other worry is that you get illegal dumping if everybody has to buy a special bag like they do in Korea or in Germany. The problem is here, how would you know if you have a trash chute? Who knows if you use the right bag or not? It's kind of impossible to tell. So I think bag-based would be very difficult in New York City with the way our buildings are set up, but on a building to building basis, it could work even with the bags that come out of the compactors. Buildings would have to buy special bags or special labels to put on each bag, and then they'd be tracked when sanitation pick them up. So if they don't have the special label, they don't pick up the bag.
So I'm curious for the people that are here presently right now, because we're on this SWAB call, y'all are invested in the Bronx. What are your thoughts on the idea of a pay-as-you-throw system? I feel like, again, you mentioned, Claire, that the cost would go in the building, but what's going to stop the building from trying to pass that on to the tenant, right? So like, I'm curious from people that are on the line, like what, and this is what's interesting around like this legislation with EPR, because the goal is to put some sort of pressure back on the manufacturer who's designing the product in the first place that's contributing to the waste. But I am on the fence about pay as you throw, because I'm just like, there's a part of me that's like, I really understand how this is. Thank you, Lee. I'm going to get to you. I really understand how this can be very efficient. Oh, baby, but I am concerned with like the other side of what that could look like in this city. So it's like one of those things around how do you jump for something, right? Even though the uncertainty is so daunting, and I'm not going to hold you up, like it's very daunting to think about. So yes, Leah, please go for it.
Hello. So Dior, remember I'm named Leia, like
Leia,
Star Wars.
Every time I see it, I think, thank you.
I know it's been a long time since we've talked, but everybody, I lived in a country and a city where we had pay as you go. I lived there for over 10 years. So I lived in Zurich, Switzerland. And what I observed is that you have to have kind of like an infrastructure that goes with it. We had in Zurich, the city of Zurich, you had garbage bags. You had special garbage bags you can only buy in certain places, and they were very costly. Other towns and cities had what Claire mentioned, you put a sticker on it, and they had garbage police there, which would I know people who got calls from the garbage police. But anyhow, one of the big things to make this work as just, a person who lives in a residence is that you really don't want to bring things into your home, because then you either have to recycle them or put them in the really expensive garbage bags. So what does that mean? That means, I wrote about in the chat, Aldi for an example, but any supermarket, people buy their stuff and then they unpack. There's always a counter on the other side, and you can unpack your stuff so you don't take any packaging home with you that you don't need to, because that makes sense. You have less stuff to throw away. Single-use plastics is a big thing in New York City. It's a big thing in our country. It is not as big a thing as, you know, in other countries and in Switzerland. So that would be another part of our typical behavior that we would have to think about and think of how can we do this differently. You buy shoes, they don't give you the shoe box. Most people don't take their shoe boxes home. I was the only crazy person that did it. And that in turn puts pressure on the manufacturers to manufacture things with less packaging because either the store has to deal with it or the consumer does. So for instance, toothpaste, we buy our toothpaste in like a box. They buy their toothpaste just with like a little thing along the top to kind of keep, you know, show that like the lid or the whatever, the little flip thing on the top is kind of packaged, but the toothpaste tube is not. Of course, we have problems in the United States that they don't really have there with things like people trying, you know, to manipulate products or whatever. So we would have to find our own way through it. But I think living our life as we do now and thinking about costly garbage bags, most people would say no. But if we could build up and change people's habits and the way they bring things into their home so that they don't have to put a lot of stuff into their garbage bags, that would be the way to go. So I hope that made sense. If anybody has any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cecil. I want you to go since you I know you got some shifting happening.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Happy Monday. It's great to see familiar faces. Yeah, so I found the presentation really interesting. Thank you, Claire and Leah. I'm really glad that someone's bringing up like the non-New York perspective, especially too with the prompt, the environmental, the 12th principle that Lilybeth was bringing up. Because I think a lot of like the decisions with how to change behaviors, a lot of times they're not taking into like consideration urban behaviors or like urban practices versus rural, and also what's been going into the decisions in New York. A lot of the people are smart people, great minds, but coming from other places, and that could be a great thing, or it could be something that requires a lot of work. And like pay as you throw, I think is a good example. I went to college in Maine, and I was very involved with the law up there in central Maine, like very rural, like, you know, one of the most rural states like in the country. And it's a big swing state, like just for a tiny bit of context, very purple. But while I was there, it was like Trump land. So pay as you throw kind of went through this very interesting story. I can like geek out about it offline anytime. But something that I think was really like, and it was one of the like earlier versions too to really take like effect in an American city. But one of the big factors I think that really helped it to take off, especially in like a very deep red like Republican state where people don't like to talk about the government pushing things, was really having like a good system for movement of that trash. Like Leah was saying just now, I believe having the trash not interfere with your personal space and not having to like lift things in and out of the house. Here, I think having a big transportation system would be really key infrastructure, because over there in Maine and in a lot of other rural places, people, they have cars, like they can easily put like 10 times the amount of trash in like an SUV or a pickup truck, and they can handle their groceries, they can handle like industrial goods for work. And it's like another burden that you don't really have to think about, that if we did institute that here, having people be able to like figure out what's a good system of carrying a lot of weight, or what's a reliable way of carrying that over a long distance, that's something that people would have to think about. And then where they're able to store it, if we're not all living in like a very residential area with a lot of yard space, that movement and also that storage question is going to be really hard to deal with when a lot of us are cramped together in many parts of the city. And then the other thing, like the huge thing, I think, was the tax revenue or like the tax burden, because at least in Maine, like there are hardly any taxes, you know, so it's a little easier. You don't have to go like climbing a higher financial burden, even though there's a lot of poverty, you know, but the I guess the impact is much bigger proportionately if you can convince people to either have something be charged based on how much you produce, which wouldn't hit everyone the same way, or if you can find that right like equilibrium point where it doesn't really hurt people's pockets and you're able to set a foundation for maybe another policy later. And here in New York, like, you know, everyone here knows it's so expensive. Like the tax burden is already way up there. Not even considering like for income levels and certain people having to pay more for rent and for groceries, and then inflation. That's the big thing everyone's talking about in government. So yeah, I think pay as you throw would be really good. And I love the idea of the circular city and you know, some of those gems I saw in the presentation. And I think we're raising really good questions about what people do outside of New York, because like that transportation network, the storage question, and the tax question, like the budget question, like all of that, like I can't wrap my head around it, but that's what we're gonna have to figure out like in New York before we like have that hit us on a widespread scale.
Yeah, those are really good points, if I can just respond to them. And I do know cities who have kind of piloted pay as you throw in a smaller neighborhood first, but I think I kind of believe in New York City it can't happen at an individual level because of that. I mean, it's just too much to have to buy special garbage bags for so many people here, and the additional cost would definitely go on to the person. If it was done on an individual level, or you'd have to get a certain amount of free bags and then could trade in bags. It just seems really complicated. Whereas if it's done at a building scale, if you own a like 2-family building, you just pay the same amount of taxes if you just have a 40-gallon trash bin. If you want a bigger trash bin, you have to pay on top. So I think it could be done that it would be, you know, you already pay for water and electricity if you own a building and you pay taxes. You have to have that kind of thing going on. I think it would be fairly easy to see, okay, I have $100 rebate, tax rebate a year, and I have to pay $100 a year if I use this size garbage can. But if I want a bigger one, I have to pay $150. So I think it could be that it's not passed on to the residents, as Dior said she was worried about, because it's a kind of 1-for-1 swap. And a bigger building, the same thing. You could get a $1,000 rebate if you did the average amount. And then if you do more, you pay more. And then that kind of incentivizes you to provide some convenience for your residents to recycle, or provide education, or provide compost options, because you would save money as a building if residents did a better job. So you're not going to make it really difficult for them. I don't know, it makes some sense to me. I'm really interested to hear people's views though.
Same, because that is I don't know if anybody wanted to jump in before I go ahead. Feel free to unmute at any point. But as I mentioned, like, I'm on the fence, but I see it as a thing that will influence and shift behavior and move us into action if we feel it. Now, I do strongly believe, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to tap into the committee work, because that's where it we can get into the nuts and bolts of deepening the conversation. Like, for example, the rallies that are coming up this week, we could write some testimony on behalf of the SWAB to weigh in on what we think about, these zero waste policies that are coming up. And I think that would be really an effective exercise for us, but also to continue to think about these different ways that will be able to influence what happens. Now, the pay as you throw, we haven't talked about really too much in this space, but one of the reasons why I was asking about how you all felt was to see if this is something that we wanted to explore and put some energy behind, learning more about it in order to support it, or if you just like are automatically like not feeling it, right? So far we've gotten some feedback that says like, okay, we might want to consider it. Because my thinking is like, all right, if we're gonna let's pilot pay as you throw in the same neighborhoods that we're piloting the organics pilot, right? Like let's keep it right along the same, let's keep that same energy, right? And see how it works out. And so that's part of my thinking, but I'm curious what you all think. Does it make sense? Do you want to explore pay as you throw a little bit more? I really want to put some more energy around these rallies that are coming up. But yeah, let me know how you feel about pay as you throw.
And I'm going to have to jump in.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you so much, Claire.
But thank you, everybody. And yeah, you can reach out on the website if people have questions, and thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, how are we feeling about pay as you throw? You can feel free to type in the chat or come off. If you don't have any feelings about pay as you throw, you can say that too. What we have coming up this week on Thursday and Friday, it is up in the chat. Is anybody available to come out? It's going to be at City Hall in Manhattan for both of these, but do any of these times work for folk? Just because, again, like to be able to have the presence with the Bronx SWAB, this is part of what the actions look like. So I wanna, and I'm gonna hop on with you, Peter, after, but I wanna see if we could, at the very least, see if we could get on the same page around some testimony. How do people feel about, do people, first of all, first question, do we know, right? Do we know about what this is that I've put here? Like, let's start there. Are we familiar with what's happening on Thursday and Friday with the commercial waste zones, and also with this zero waste, with the city's zero waste goals? Yes, Friday group.
I'm reading it right now, but if you want to give a quick recap, that's dope.
Awesome. So the commercial waste zones is essentially a zoning system where there are going to be haulers that bid for zones, and it's supposed to significantly reduce the amount of truck traffic that we have going through our neighborhoods, because now the trucks there won't be as many, right? They'll be servicing particular areas, whatever's in their zone. And so they're going to have about three haulers to a zone. So there is a rally coming up on Friday around the importance of continuing to move it forward and push it forward. And then on Thursday, there is the zero waste rally as well, where what is happening is they are reintroducing the CORE Act, which is essentially something that says, like, in each community board, there should be a location. Because, like, I don't know how you all move right now, but right now you got to take your hazards, like, you either got to go to a safe disposal event, or you have to take your hazards to a location down in the South Bronx that's only open like one time a month. So, people are still disposing of this stuff in a hazardous way. So the CORE Act is saying that we put locations and infrastructure in each of our community boards that allows people to be able to take this material, whether it be organics, whether it be hazardous, whether it be what you know what I'm saying? Like all of those different streams that are difficult that end up in our trash, and take it there, and to encourage more of a organizational system as it relates to separating the waste better. So those are the things that are coming up on Thursday and Friday. And so it would be nice if we could, like I said, submit some testimony around what is important to us, what we want to prioritize as a borough, what we feel is at the front of our minds around what we want to see change immediately. That's what I want to put action behind right now as a SWAB, right? So we're coming together. I would like for us to get on the same page around what we really want to put our collective effort behind, because we all have different interests and different things that draw us to it, but we need to have a collective thing that moves us on, okay, like if we're going to pilot a neighborhood and put some of these bins and test it out, let's see how that goes, right? If we're going to try to set up a different system where we consolidate the waste and pay some young people to bike it to a particular space, let's advocate for that, right? Like we have the resources, we can talk to the borough president's office. There's actually a grant, there's a first round and a second round coming up with sanitation. Oh, that link, I should have it for you. But there is a round coming up with sanitation where we could write for the grant and work together as a community-based organization and work with a bid. And basically, like, they'll give us money to actually put some infrastructure in place that can help with some of these issues. So I want us to be on top of that, like right now, because the money's now and it's here. So if we could get on the same page about that, that would be dope. Yeah, did anybody have any? Okay.
I mean, this is hot. Like, this is hot subject. Like, I mean, ask for the, pie in the sky. I'm like, speak big and let's walk back from there. But in my mind, it's just about securing composting. All I think about is compost. And I will just kind of like acknowledge that there is, Soundview Compost Facility is a large facility that is underutilized in Soundview Park. And it has been a site that I've been talking with others, specifically a group that is focused on activating public spaces called Nice Caps. And together, we recognize that soil is a big barrier to a lot of our work. Myself, I work with gardens and food, and a lot of us work with the land. And so working with the Office of Environmental Remediation, trying to activate the site for at least a clean soil bank where glacial remains and clean topsoil can be placed for mixture with DSNY compost. So I want to acknowledge that site exists, that the Bronx River Alliance, the organization I work with, I'm employed by New York City Parks, but work with Bronx River Alliance. We've been approached about activating it as a site for outreach and education. And while there is still a long way in the discussion and it's, happening very slowly, there is going to be a moment where we will be supporting the creation of like an education outreach program for that space. And obviously y'all and plus so many others should be a part of a large coalition to help support that space. But for me, it's about securing composting and thinking about what's possible in the Bronx with solid waste. And for me, as a gardener and working with Parks Department, one of our largest waste streams that I see is actually invasive plants or weeds. And we're not able to compost those items because we don't have the system to get the temperatures up. But with like infrastructure, it's possible. And so Soundview Composting Facility is a 13-acre facility, or at least the land allocated. It's right adjacent to the NYCHA Soundview houses, as well as a thriving neighborhood. But yeah, about 3 acres is activated at the moment. And while food is not kind of a conversation that can happen for that site, the things that can happen are around like storm debris, which we do, Bronx River Alliance, we clear out log jams from the river. So we bring a lot of woody debris from the forest and things like that.
Oh, we can't hear you. You just went out of nowhere. See the level of disrespect. Maybe try muting and unmuting and see if that works.
Internet.
Always when it's getting good.
For real.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Anyway, just to say that this is coming and like the conversation, I would love to start the conversation, but also like, composting feels like a big piece, and just trying to figure out how to segregate all that wet material from, and for me, when I like the idea of the bins a lot, especially with like all these these organizing shows on Netflix. I'm like, oh my God, bins are the solution to every problem. But I also recognize that like a lot of people in our community resist being put into boxes. And also I think that might somehow manifest in its own ways. And so I think it works potentially for buildings, but I think we need to focus on composting and getting the wet stuff out of garbage for that to work.
Okay, I'm gonna have to respond to that, because that jolts me, and that really, I'm very much connected to that. And one of the things I try not to do in this space is be like, this is what I care about. So this is what I think we should do, right? So it's always nice when somebody else can come up and I can be like, yes, I agree, right? I do think that that's a very, very good point. So one of the things I do want to point out is that as we continue to collectively have the conversation, even as you mentioned the idea of not liking to be put in boxes, we could have things with art is a big thing for us, right? Here in this borough, here in this city, like art is so much connected to culture. So if there are ways that we could organize and actually have art as a part of the box, right? And how residents are able to influence, well, what does that infrastructure look like? What do I have to look at every day, right? Did I paint that, right? Did I go there? Did I do something on that thing that's right there that everybody gets to see walking past every day? So those are the things that we can do, right? We can do that. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I agree. I really, really, really do think strongly that if we have a system to deal with the wet stuff, which is why I'm a big supporter, as Claire had mentioned in the presentation, a big supporter of the sorts of machines that's going to separate, right? That's going to at least give us, dealing with the microbes obviously helps to break it down better. And the sludge that we get at the end is very dense material, but we can still work with it in our composting systems. It's so much better than the food waste raw as it is. But we have these kinds of machinery that we can build around the city, right? We can build them and pilot them in certain places and raise the money and be like, all right, we're going to put that machine right there. And this is what it's going to look like to collect this amount of waste per day. And it'll be the wet stuff. And we can talk about contamination and we can really get into the nut and bolts of it. But we have a system where we actually are dealing with the wet stuff. Because if we have a bunch of places where we can't deal with the wet stuff, then we're still in the same boat, right? How we have all of those acres of land and we can't use it for the food like that. What are we doing, right? Why are we not just figuring out how to do that and how to make it happen? I know rodents are an issue, right? Okay, so let's deal with that. All right, awesome. So you were saying something a little bit, that's a lot for me to read a little bit. Do you want to just come off of speaker?
No, well, Allison brought up a great question, and maybe people in this group, I know we only have a couple minutes, but Allison brought up about any conversation with electeds about organics legislation.
Hi.
Any ongoing conversations with that?
That's where we're going. That's the reason why we're having a conversation now. We are still building and getting things together as a SWAB. So that's where folks on the line now who are present, active, know what's happening within the borough, have a stake, a vested interest. We're kind of like collectivizing that from now and shifting. So I think that is a good point. And knowing who are the elected officials within the Bronx that do support it. And then we got to figure out the people who don't, and that's who we need to be putting some energy behind. And those are the kind of things that we can do as a legislative committee. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Allison? Please, I would love to hear. Thank you for being present. The Manhattan SWAB has been around for a while.
Right. No, thanks. And I know Matt was going to reach out to you, I think, about this, but I just saw on your website that you're having a meeting now. We are starting to, there's a bill that's been proposed for mandatory organics collection. I don't know if you've seen, the article was announced on Earth Day. So, we're in the process of trying to set up meetings with Manhattan council members. And I think you have 5 council members in the Bronx. One of them spans Manhattan and Bronx, Diana Ayala. And I don't know if anybody on the Bronx SWAB has a relationship with her, or I haven't emailed her yet, but I did email all the other council members in Manhattan to try to set up a meeting. And I just wanted to know if you guys, where you were in the process. Sounds like you're just starting. I don't know if you have a separate committee that focuses on it. I'm just learning, where you are and what you guys do. Yeah, we can work together because I think we all want the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. You're gonna say something?
No, obviously you have to vote on, we have to vote on what we, support and everybody, but I think this is, we talked to Brooklyn SWAB. All the SWABs probably have to have a group call and talk about this issue.
Yeah, And so is the goal, because I think one of the things that I had in mind as well was setting up some sort of like waste forum or some sort of waste like town hall to be able to really encourage residents to come on and voice their concerns about the issues of trash that's happening in their communities, and allow our council members that sit on different committees to be able to address how we can collectively come together and organize what that will look like. So yeah, we have ideas of committees. As activated as they are, it's still the movement of organizing.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, Leah, our organics committee would essentially be our environmental justice committee, because we don't have a specific organics committee. So the committees we have is environmental justice, legislative, and outreach and education. And so those are the ones that folks had expressed most interest in when we were going through that. So I think, you know, we have some movement happening in EJ. And we are working to still get legislative and outreach off. And I think legislative is where we're putting our energy next. And that's what all of the you know, actions that are coming up this week, which is why it's helpful to kind of get on the strategy of what it'll look like to contact the council members. So my idea, you know, is really having this sort of town hall. Y'all are you trying to set up a meeting with your council members, right?
Well, we want the budget to be restored. You know, the mayor cut the budget.
Yeah.
And we have some, you know, pretty well thought out ideas about, you know, how it can be restored, and what what a revised, you know, rebooted program should look like. So I did, you know, I saw to get on this meeting, I kind of signed up for your newsletter. So will I be now notified of your other meetings? Because
We don't have a newsletter, but you'll go on the calendar invite. We have a calendar invite that notifies folks. And then there's an email list that also gets sent out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to join, you know, whatever meeting it is where you'd like to talk about this more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, y'all, it's 7:32. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Thank you so much for dropping that link down there. Oh, is this the article?
Yes.
That just came out? Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Lilibeth, for throwing that in the chat. Organics.
It was Leah.
Oh, thank you.
But
Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
It is the fastest. I'll slow it down. But I'm gonna let you all hop off. Are there any final words, closing thoughts, anything anybody would like to get off and share? We're gonna move into the 1, 2, 3. The couple of y'all that are on the line, I'm gonna throw y'all in an email so that we can get some testimony together, right? Let's get some testimony together to go represent the Bronx SWAB. Even if you can't be physically present, we can always submit testimony. So let us just put some energy behind that. I think that'll also, you know, like I said, support. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. All right, so we will be doing that. I'll make sure that goes out. Peter, you stay on the line, and thank the rest of y'all so much for being present. Let's do the work and take care of yourself, right? Self-care comes first. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.